Is this working? Yes, it is. Okay. Well, I'm glad for that. Otherwise, I was going to have to go over there and grab that one. But apparently, this is working. And when I first got started, when I first came in, some people were afraid that the size of the class was down. I said, well, it's probably because they heard I was teaching. So, you know, that wouldn't surprise me either. I'm going to put it down a little bit so maybe I can see you. We're looking at John chapter 6, verses 1 through 15. And I'll read that, and then we'll have our class. Well, actually, we're having our class now. So, anyway, John chapter 6, beginning with verse 1 and reading through verse 15. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on a mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread, so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Perceiving that they were about to come and take him by force, and to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. This is the account of the 4th sign that John has recorded in his gospel. You remember the first sign was when he turned the water into wine. And of course, you remember that the one who was in charge of the banquet, of the wedding feast, he was surprised that the wine that was made by Jesus was better than the wine that they'd started out with. The second sign was when the royal official came to Jesus. His son was very ill and was about to die. And he asked Jesus to come to his house to heal his son. And Jesus indicated that wasn't necessary, but he said, "Go back home and he will be healed." And you remember when he got home, his son was healed. And he asked about the healing of the son, what time it was, when it happened. And it was the same time as when Jesus had indicated his son would be healed. The third sign that we looked at earlier was the man that was paralyzed, the paralytic, who was at the pool of Bethesda. And he was unable to get into the water because somebody would always get in ahead of him. And you remember that Jesus healed him. And that was great. This man had been paralyzed for 38 years. And it just had to be such a great time of rejoicing for him. I was recently, this month, October, I had my surgery and I became paralyzed. And well, it'd be nice if I could get free from that. I was always able to walk and do what I wanted to do, but now I have to depend on this. And I can imagine the joy and the excitement this man had, especially 38 years. I've only been messing with this for 3 years. And it's been one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with. But you know what? It could be a lot worse. And I'm very blessed. So I look at it that way. So that was the third sign. Now the fourth sign was that we read about just a moment ago. The feeding of the 5,000 men. And this is the only sign that was recorded in all four Gospels. The other signs are recorded, but not every Gospel writer recorded about all the different signs that Jesus had done. In this chapter, Jesus had returned to Galilee. And we also remember that it was during the time that it was close to the Passover. And remember, the Passover was an annual celebration that the Jews celebrated. In essence, it was kind of a celebration of the 10th plague that was visited upon the Egyptian nation. The 10th plague being the death of the firstborn. You remember that the Jews were told, in order to avoid the death of the firstborn, to sacrifice an animal and put the blood on the doorpost. And when the death angel passed over, when he saw the blood, he spared that house. So the Passover was a very important festival and a time of remembrance for the Jewish nation. It reminded them of the death of the firstborn that the Egyptian nation experienced. It reminded them that they were set free from bondage from the Egyptian nation. And so at this time, Jesus had gone to Galilee. It was close to the time of the Passover. And there was also a time when Jesus was very, very, very popular. He was drawing large crowds. The crowds were just massive. Well, here was a crowd of at least 5,000 men. So Jesus was very popular. You know, later he became very unpopular. And as he stood before Pilate, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" When Pilate asked, "What shall I do with Jesus?" But at this time he was very popular. And the crowds were mesmerized by his healing of the sick, by the miracles that he could perform. And they began to think in their minds and in their hearts that this had to be the prophet, the Messiah, the one that they had been hoping for hundreds and hundreds of years. So this was a time of excitement for the nation of Israel. They realized that this was the Messiah, or at least they began to think that this was the Messiah. And they began to think he would set us free. Kind of when we were set free by Egyptian bondage, we will be set free from Roman bondage and Roman rule. That he would liberate them from Roman rule. So with these large crowds pressing on him, Jesus oftentimes was weary and tired, fatigued, worn out because of the large crowds and the pressure that was on him. And probably being human, though he was the Son of God, he was also the Son of Man. And so he needed time to be away from the crowd. He needed time to just relax, time to pray, Time to, as we say today, to chill out. And in a sense, this was an escape from the crowds. But it wasn't long, and this escape was no longer an escape. Because soon the crowds were coming. I'm reading from John chapter 6, verses 5 through 7, because I want to focus on that for just a minute. Lifting up his eyes then and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered, 200 denarii would not buy enough for each of them to get even a little. You can see that large crowd now pressing on Jesus. And Jesus, apparently aware that they were hungry, that they were weary, he wanted them to be fed. And so he turns to Philip, one of his disciples, and he said, "Where are we going to buy food to feed this large crowd?" You can imagine that Philip, in his mind, was thinking, what in the world? How in the world can we feed them? We're about 9 miles from a city. There's no way we could find that kind of bread, that amount of bread. And then he turns around and says, not only can we not find the bread, or in his mind thinking we cannot find the bread, but even if we could find the bread to feed this crowd, it would take 200 denarii in order to buy that much bread for them to have just a little. I think Philip was probably surprised by the question that Jesus asked. Where are we going to find bread to feed these people? In his mind, I think he's probably thinking, are you kidding? You're asking me to find bread to feed these people? Don't you understand that it would take 200 denarii in order to do that? We don't even have the bread, but even if we had it, we don't have the money. It'd be 200 denarii. A denarii was the normal rate that a man would receive for one day's labor. So that was 200 days. Almost 2/3 of a year's salary would have to be spent to buy food for these 5,000 men. I don't know what your wage is or salary is. I don't want to know. It's none of my business. But think about what you make in a year. If you had to give 2/3 of it to buy bread, it'd be a large amount. And I'm sure in the mind of these people, in the mind of Philip especially, you can just, Jesus, we can't even find that much bread. But if we do, even if we find it, we don't have that much money. You can just see in his mind, he's saying, this is impossible. It just can't be done. These people are just going to have to go hungry. They don't have to be fed. We didn't invite them to a meal. They'll just have to do without. After the event took place, when Jesus fed the 5,000 men, I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that perhaps every time Philip sat down to eat, he would remember this time and think, I remember. I got bread, I got some fish, or I got something to eat. And I can remember when Jesus asked me to feed 5,000. I suspect it was something that he remembered many, many, many times. I won't take time to read. Well, I do want to read it because I think it's important. I'm going to read from John chapter 6, verses 8 through 9. This is what transpires after Philip was surprised by being asked by Jesus to feed the 5,000. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Apparently, Andrew, the brother of Peter, heard Jesus say to Philip, "We want to feed these people. Where are we going to find bread to feed these people?" Philip, of course, responded by saying, "Can't be done. Even if we found it, we don't have the money." Andrew apparently went through the crowd, searching to see if anybody had any food to feed the crowd. Apparently, he found this boy, this lad, who had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Certainly, that would not be enough to feed 5,000. You know, I was thinking about that. You know that little communion packet you probably picked up and that little piece of bread? If I pulled that little piece of bread out, I got it in my little packet. If I pulled that out, you know, it's probably about that big. And I said, "I've got some bread. You guys can all have some." You'd probably all fall out of your chair. Like, good night. You know, he looks stupid, but he really is stupid. Well, Philip, I'm sorry, not Philip, Andrew did what he could. He went to the crowd and he found this lad who had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Well, what is that?" At least he did something. But he said, "What is that for this crowd?" What I'd like for us to do now is look at the difference between Philip and Andrew. There was a big difference. The Bible doesn't say this, but I get the impression that Philip was almost kind of argumentative. Almost like, "Jesus, have you lost your mind? We got 5,000 men here. And you're asking me, where's the bread? We're 9 miles from a city where we could possibly even find some bread, but if we found it, where in the world are we going to get 200 denarii? We just don't have it." I just can see Philip being almost argumentative, perhaps even irritated. "You're asking me to do this, and you're asking me to do the impossible?" Andrew, he knew the feeding of 5,000 was daunting. He knew that it was something that wasn't going to be easy. But at least he tried to do something. He investigated among the crowd. And perhaps some had food and they wouldn't even tell him about it. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say. Some of the commentators said that probably many had food, but they were unwilling to let Andrew know about the food they had. Whether that's true or not, don't know. Doesn't matter. But Andrew found this young lad who had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. This young man apparently volunteered and said, "Hey, I got 5 loaves of barley bread. I've got 2 fish." And perhaps in his mind as well as in Andrew's mind, what is that to feed these 5,000? What is that for so many? Barley loaves were the cheapest and the junkiest of any bread that could be eaten. Only the poor had to eat barley loaves. And the fish were probably so small. Jerry, you're a fisherman, I understand. And I understand probably if you caught a fish that big, you would probably throw it back. In fact, that might be your bait. I don't know. The commentators indicated that the fish, the two fishes that the young lad had, were probably like sardines. I remember when I was a kid in Toledo, we once in a while would eat sardines. There wasn't much. And we didn't have much to eat. We had the can, but we had more than two. But that was it. So I can just see the difference between Philip almost being argumentative. Jesus, you're out of your mind. There's no way we can do this. And you're saying, wow, this is going to be something amazing. This is going to be tremendous to feed 5,000. But I don't know how we're going to do it. But I'll at least try to find out, see if there's anybody has any food, see if we can possibly do this. It couldn't be done, but it was done. I wonder sometimes if sometimes we are kind of like Philip. We look at the commandments that God has given us, and we think, that's way too much. That's way too big. It can't be done. Jesus requested. He asked that we be perfect, like the Father is perfect. And we all understand that he didn't mean that we would be sinless. That is impossible. But he did indicate that we need to be perfect as God is perfect. Sometimes I've been guilty of, wow, that's a little bit too much. That's asking too much. How in the world could he expect me to be perfect like God is perfect? And yet, that's what he's asked. And I realize it's challenging. And I realize that it's a big responsibility. But the Bible, Jesus taught that that's one of our challenges, to be like the Father. I'm thinking about what Jesus said after he was resurrected, and after he was, or just before he was about to rise into heaven to be with his Father, to be at the right hand. Remember what he commanded his disciples. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creatures. And he that believes and is baptized will be saved. And he that doesn't believe will be lost. You know, I look at that command and I think, wow, go into all the world and preach the gospel. How in the world can we do that? How in the world can we share the gospel? How can we share the good news that Jesus was raised from the dead, that he was the Son of God, and that he died for us, that he loved us, that he was filled with mercy and grace and compassion? How could we tell that great story? You know what? I think that's what this congregation is doing. I don't know how long ago it was that this congregation started the search program. A young preacher named Max Lyon took that commandment seriously. And the elders of this congregation took that commandment seriously. And of course, Max Lyon started the search program. And it's an attempt to share the gospel to all the world. And I'm thankful for men like Max Lyon, who had that vision and who took that commandment seriously. That he didn't just say, oh my goodness, it can't be done. We're just too small. It's just impossible. And then, of course, Phil Sanders, the baton was passed to him. And what a marvelous job he's doing. And when I have opportunities to be in other parts of the world, I hear about the search program. And it was because of the vision of the elders. It was because of the vision of Max Lyon and the continued vision of this congregation and the continued vision of Phil Sanders to share the gospel in all the world. It would have been so easy to have said, are you kidding? Share the gospel in all the world? It can't be done. It's impossible. But this congregation started with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And here we are, going into all the world, sharing the gospel. So I look at you as a congregation. And my wife and I are here from Ada. We moved from Ada to Edmond, as you know, for about 1.5 years. And we are so blessed to be with the congregation that had that great vision. I think about the Haitian work. I think about the missionaries. I think about all the things that this congregation is involved in trying to share the gospel with our 5 barley loaves and our 2 fish. What an amazing, amazing testimony of this congregation and how blessed we are that we can be a part of it. You probably know my wife and I, when we got married 57 years ago, we got married on a Saturday. We spent the night in Edmond, and Sunday morning we went to the Edmond Church of Christ. So we've gone full circle. And here we are back at the Edmond Church of Christ. And what a blessing. And we were very blessed at other congregations where we've been. And they had vision. I had a chance to preach at Prague, Oklahoma, Choctaw, Oklahoma. And when I was at Ada, I had opportunity to preach around that area. Crescent, Oklahoma. I'm very blessed. And now we've gone full circle. And here we are at Edmond with a congregation that's taken 5 barley loaves and the 2 fish and gone out into all the world to preach the gospel. So basically what we've seen here is a tremendous showing of the power of Jesus. There's no way on earth that you could take 5 barley loaves and 2 fish and feed 5,000 men. And after everyone had eaten, they gathered 12 baskets of fragments. I thought it was ironic. They had more food at the end than what they began with. 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, 12 baskets full of fragments. And each man didn't get just a little bite. So they were filled. They ate as much as they wanted. The crowd saw a divine sign. And they were convinced that this was the prophet. This was a Messiah that they had been hoping for hundreds of years. And they wanted to seize him and make him king. In John chapter 6, begin with verse 13. I want to read that again. We read it earlier, but I want to read it again because I think it's so important. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves, left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, indeed, this is the prophet who has come into the world. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. The scriptures talk about 5,000 men being fed. Apparently, from what the commentators are saying, there was more than 5,000 that were fed, with women and children. Nobody knows for sure. Some have speculated between 6,000 to 8,000. I was thinking maybe 10,000. I don't know. It doesn't matter. If you just fed 5,000 with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, that is an amazing, amazing thing that took place. And the people saw it, and they understood. This has to be the prophet. And in their mind, they thought, if he's a prophet, if he's a Messiah, if he's our king, we need to make him king and allow him to free us from Roman bondage. Now let us look at the 5th sign. In John chapter 6, beginning with verse 16. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because of a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. Jesus apparently remained in the mountain, staying away from the disciples. And it was now evening, and they decided that they were going to go to Capernaum. And the only way they could get there would be get in a boat and row to Capernaum. And apparently that's what they did. This obviously has been a very busy day. Jesus had been with the crowd. He had fed the crowd. Probably during the feeding, we don't know for sure, but the likelihood is that when he was feeding the crowd, he was teaching them. He certainly was teaching the disciples, and he understood that they decided that they were going to make him a king. So in a sense, he had to get away. He had to escape. He had to get away so that they would not make him a king as they had chosen. Capernaum was about 4 or 5 miles from where they were. So they got in the boat. And the scripture said that they rowed about 3 or 4 miles. So they were about 4/5 of the way, or 3/5 of the way. We don't know for sure exactly how far they had rowed. It was about 3 or 4 miles. Rowing a boat like that was probably pretty hard work. And these men, it was late. They were probably exhausted. And they're rowing. Jesus was not in the boat with them. In time, he decides to catch up with them. And he begins walking on the water. They said that the sea was rough. I'm told, I've never been there, but I'm told that at the Sea of Galilee or the Sea of Tiberias, however you recognize it, there are mountains around there. And when the wind blows, it's very powerful. And because of the mountains, it really stirs up the water and really causes great storms on the sea. So they're rowing, and it's hard enough when the sea is calm, and now they got this rough water. And as they're rowing as hard as they can, they see this figure. And obviously they were frightened. I mean, how are you going to have somebody walking on water. I mean, it just doesn't happen. It's impossible. What in the world is that coming towards us? Jesus assured them, it's me. It's me, Jesus. It is I. Well, of course, they immediately welcomed him. You know when he got in the boat? Nobody recognizes this as the sixth sign, and it probably shouldn't be. I'm not. But as soon as he got in the boat, they're at the land. Maybe it was jet propulsion. I don't know. I know one thing. It was not the ordinary thing that happened. Jesus walking on water. And you know these disciples, they saw the feeding of the 5,000. They saw the boat when Jesus came in, zipping right to the land they've been trying to go to. It had to leave a mark on them, a memory on them that they would never, never forget. You know, I wonder, as I think about this, was the power of gravity suspended? What do you think? Do you think gravity was suspended? You probably hate to answer because you think, oh boy, if I answer it would be a stupid question, a stupid answer. I don't know. I don't think it was suspended. I think Jesus was able to walk on the water, not because gravity was suspended, but because it was overcome. I think if one of the disciples had dropped something into the water, I think it would have sank. I don't know that. I'm not sure about that. I'm just speculating. I'm just telling you what I think. And I don't think gravity was suspended. But Jesus overpowered it. The Son of God. And that's my lesson. I guess we're kind of early closing. And you know what? I hope you won't get mad if you have to quit early. So, what can I say? Go for it.